Okay, so today we are going to start with addition and subtraction of decimals. I will display a number of rules and regulations regarding addition and subtraction of decimals, and I will go through the number of rules and then I'll explain them once, maybe twice, and then we will solve related examples and sample problems. And I'm sure that all the difficulties you have regarding to the subject will be cleansed if and only if you watch this video till the end. So start. The first rule basically says arrange the number with decimal points below one another. Let's take a sample problem. We'll take any decimal sum. Say for example 18.2 plus 6.09. So whenever I see this sum, I'll take any number from these. I'll take any number between them and then I'll put it here, and then I'll take the other number and then I'll display it, or I'll write it below the already taken number. Okay, so all I wanted to say is whenever you solve sums, so please bear in mind that you leave spaces between the numbers and the decimals, because if you start writing like this, so it becomes really confusing and chaotic, and you'll find difficulty in solving complex problems that we are going to solve ahead. And one more thing, if in this video whatever rules and regulations I'm going to tell you, the fundamental basic rules, please note them down, please listen to them and do make some sense out of it, because if you solve and if you understand these fundamental rules and you apply them in your sums, so you'll find no difficulty in solving it. And the other thing is that 50% of the problem that is in front of you will already be solved. Believe me, 50% of the problem will already be solved. Bear this in mind and follow the rules. So the first rule basically means that whatever decimal points you have, arrange them in vertical order so that they are not diagonal or they are not sleeping. They should be vertical. That is the correct way. So whenever you see any kind of sum, make sure that the decimal points that are in it are arranged in a vertical fashion. So if they are in a vertical fashion, good, you have completed 10% or 25% of the sum already. So then we start calculating it. So basically whenever you see any empty spaces, just bear in mind that add that many number of zeros to it. So say for example we take some decimal values 209 and another decimal value 49 and another decimal value 9987. So whatever empty spaces are there, just fill them up with zeros and your work is done. Okay, so moving ahead, we'll solve the sum. 0 plus 9 is 9, 2 plus 0 is 2, decimal, 8 plus 6 is 14, 1 is carried over, and the answer is 24.29. Now one more note to viewers, whenever some people ask me that, hey, does only one get carried over numbers? No, that is a wrong explanation. Any number of numbers can be get carried over by on others above on other numbers. They can be 2, 3, 4 or even 9. So this is the final answer, and then we'll solve one more example, then we'll move on to the next rule. Okay, so the next example is okay. So let's take one number from the sum, 18.20. Make sure that you leave some gaps between the numbers, and then we'll take the other number and we'll make sure that the decimal comes in a vertically fashion below one another, and then we'll start adding. 0 plus 9 is 9, 2 plus 6 is 8, 8 plus 9 is 17, 1 gets carried over, 1 plus 1 is 2. So the answer is 27.89. Again, in this sum, people ask me that, hey, again, if only 1 gets carried over, does only 1 get carried over? No, that is a wrong explanation to that problem. The correct explanation is that any number of numbers can get carried over above other numbers. It can be 2, 3, 4, 5 and even 9. But the only thing is that 0 can never get carried over by numbers or above numbers. Okay, so I'll try to do another examples, one last sum, and then we'll move on to the next rule. Okay, so let's take one number from the sum. I make sure that there are gap between these numbers, enough gaps so that I may not be confused when I'm solving the sum, and then we'll add the number. As I've said earlier, wherever there are empty spaces, just add any number of zeros that deem appropriate. Also, one more thing that I wanted to add, if there is a number, say for example 2.3, so if you add any number of zeros to it, 1, 2, 3, 10,000, infinite number of zeros, it does not change the actual value of the number that I've displayed here, or any other number in fact. So say for example there is this decimal 2.3, so if you add any number of zeros ahead of it, the basic and the most simplistic value will always be 2.3. It will not be altered in any way. Yeah, but if you add 1 0 before it, like 03 or 2.0003 or 2.0000003, these phone numbers are completely different. They are completely different. And if one says that, hey, these numbers are same, what are you talking about? It is the wrong explanation for it. Okay, so let's solve it. Also, make sure that the decimals are in a vertical fashion. If they are, excellent. If they are not, we'll try to arrange them in a vertical fashion. So let's solve. 3 plus 0 is 3, 2 plus 1 is 3, 9 plus 2 is 10. We have the decimal, and then we carry over the number, and then any number of numbers can get carried over above numbers. Please bear that in mind. It can also be 2, but in this case it is 1. So 7 plus 1 is 8, 8 plus 3 is 11. Now 2 plus 7 is 9, and plus 1, 10. So the answer is 101.033. Another thing is that please do not pronunciate this as 101.033, because do not pronunciate it as 101.33, because if you start doing that and if you actually write it in the paper, then you will get a big 0 on your answer sheet. The correct way to pronunciate this is 101.033. Okay, so let's move on to the next rule. Okay, so we'll take another color and this. Okay, so the second rule is put them, the sum of course, with the larger number. Though it is only applicable in subtraction, you can also apply this rule in addition of decimals also. With the larger number on top and the decimal points underneath it, as I have said earlier. Okay, so this rule actually means that, say for example, if you take 21.95 minus 2.34, so let's solve the sum. The first thing that should come to your mind is which is the bigger number, 21.95 or 2.34. The bigger number of course is 21.95. So we'll take 21.95 because it is a bigger number above. Make sure to leave some gaps between the numbers, and then get the smaller decimal number below it. Make sure each and every one of these numbers are in a vertical order, so that there is no confusion in solving it, and you can solve it neatly. Each and every one of these numbers and decimal points should be in a vertical order, and you can solve the sum. So 5 minus 4 is 1, 9 minus 3 is 6. Now in this case 1, so say for example, let's take a analogy. So say for example, your neighbor number 1, and your brother says to you that, hey, I don't have enough apples, can you get me some apples? Now you say, hey, how much apples do you want? He says, let's say 3, but you have only 2 in the fridge. And then you say, hey, I don't have any apples, I have only 2 apples, you said you wanted 3. So he says, so get it from the neighbor. So you go to the neighbor 2. There he has 4 apples. He has 4 apples, meanwhile you have only 2. So you say to him that, hey, can you please lend me 2 or 3 apples, or all of your apples? So he gives you 1 apple, and he'll give you 1 apple, and then you'll have 3 apples, and you'll give all of those apples to your very hungry brother, and then the brother will rejoice. So in this case, number 1 neighbor doesn't have enough apples for his brother, so he goes to the neighbor 2 for asking if he has any apples. So yes, indeed, the number has enough number of apples. Lend him some, so he gives 1 apple to him, and it becomes 11, and it itself cuts itself and becomes 1. So 11 minus 2 is 9, and only this number is remaining, so we'll take this number, and then it will become 19.61. So let's take another example. Okay, so let's take minus. Okay, so first the first thought that should come to our mind is which is the bigger number. Obviously this is the bigger number, so we'll write the bigger number down, leaving spaces between numbers so that there's no confusion in solving the sum. Okay, so wherever there are empty spaces, add the appropriate number of zeros, and we'll start subtracting. 1 minus 0 is 1. Now in this case 9 is asking 4 to give her some apples, but 4 doesn't have the required number of apples, so it goes asking for 6 if it has any apples. But 6 itself says that no, I don't have any number of apples to give to my brother also. I'm that hopeless. So then 6 goes running towards 3. Now in this case 3 also does not have enough apples to give to her brother or sister, whichever, and then it goes running towards 5. But in this case 5 has enough apples to give it to its neighbor, so it can also give 1 apple to its neighbor. What's the harm? So 5 cuts itself and becomes 4. It gives 1 apple to 3 and becomes 13. But 3 remembered its promise it made to its neighbor 6, so it cuts itself 12 and gives 1 apple to 16, which becomes 16. But 16 also remembered its promise to 4 that she lend him some apples if and whenever he has got enough apples to give her some. So then 16 cuts itself and becomes 15, and it gives 1 apple to 4 and becomes 14. So 14 minus 9 is 5, and then 15 minus 9 is 6. 12 minus 9 is 3, and 4 minus 2 is 2. So this is the final answer. Now we move on to the third rule. Okay. So the third rule is as I said earlier, fill the empty place with zeros so that all the numbers have the same number of decimal places. Number of decimal places. Okay, so in this rule we'll take both addition and subtraction numericals. So in this rule it says fill the empty place with 0 so that all the numbers have the same number of decimal places. So let's take some examples. Let's take 21.66 plus 99, or let's say 993.1. So we'll take any number. So in addition, the basic logic is that you can take any number whatsoever from the sum given, but if it is in subtraction, then if there are two numbers given in a sum, then you have to find which is the greater sum. You have to write it down, and then you have to place a smaller number below it. If it is a 3 or more number of numbers given in the sum, so all you have to do is find in a descending order which is the greatest number, which is the greatest number after the more greater number, which is a smaller number, which is the most smaller number, which is the smallest number, and then in that descending order you have to place all the numbers one below the other. So in this case, but in this case it is addition, so we can take thankfully any number. So let's take 993.1, leaving some spaces between the numbers so that there is ease of calculation, and then we'll add it with 21.66. Now what this rule emphasizes on is fill the empty place. Now this is the empty place with zeros. In this case you can have only 1 0, so that all the number have the same number of decimal places. So say for example, if 21.66 was actually 976311152, so you have to add that many number of appropriate zeros as there are to have the same number of decimal places. So in this case, we'll have that many number of zeros. In this case, it is 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. 9 zeros to have the same number of decimal places. So we'll wipe some numbers off for ease of calculation. We have added the measures deemed appropriate to solve this sum. We have the decimal dots in a vertical order, so are the rest of the numbers, for ease of calculation again. And we begin the calculations. So 0 plus 9 is 9, 0 plus 6 is 6, 1 plus 6 is 7. We add the decimal points, and then we have 3 plus 1 is 4, 9 plus 2 is 11. 1 gets carried over. Again, any number of numbers can get carried over by above the numbers. So 1 plus 9 is 10. So the answer is 1014.769. Again, you pronunciate it as 1014.769, not as 1014.769. No, that is the wrong way to pronunciate it. Okay, so let's take an example of subtraction. Okay, so we'll take 27 .583 minus 269.2. So in this case, we are to find the greatest number, which is in this case 269.2, and then we are going to write it down, leaving some gaps between the numbers so that there's ease of calculation. Then we are to place the smaller number below it, so that the decimal are in a vertical fashion and there's no confusion regarding the decimal points. And we are to write the rest of the decimal values, 5, 8, 3. Now, to have the numbers having the same number of decimal places, we are to add 2 zeros so that the numbers have the same number of decimal places. In this case, it is 2. So let's start with the calculation. Now 0 does not have enough apples to give to its brother, so it goes asking to its other neighbor to either it has enough apples to give her, to lend her some. 0 says no, but I'll let you know as soon as I can if I get the apples. Now it also wants the apples because it's, let's say dog is asking for apples, so it goes asking for her neighbor if she has any apples. She also doesn't have enough apples for her grandmother, so she goes asking for the apples to her other neighbor. But in this case, 9 has enough apples to donate some apples to 2. So 9 donates 1 apple to 2 and becomes 12, and it cuts itself to become 8 because it has given 1 apple to 2, and 2 becomes 12. So, but in this case also, 2 remembered its promise given to the other neighbor that she'll let her some if she has the appropriate number of apples that she was asking earlier. So it gives 1 apple to the other neighbor and itself cuts itself and becomes 11, and then 0 becomes 10. Now 10 also remembered its promise that was given to her, to the other neighbor, to let her know if she has enough apples to give her. So 10 becomes 9, it cuts itself, and it donates 1 apple to 0 and becomes 10. So we start with a normal calculation. So 10 minus 3 is 7. 9 And also please make sure that whatever number you have captured, it is located at the top of the numbers that you have donated the apples to. So in this case I have actually located them. I have located, so whichever neighbors have actually donated the apples to its other neighbor, you have to make sure that the numbers that are carried over are placed over the people who have donated one apple to its other neighbor and has cancelled itself. So 10 had become 9, make sure that it is located above it, and 12 cancelled itself because it gave one apple to its other neighbor and it became 11. And 9 cut itself because it had given one apple to its neighbor, 2, which had become 12, which had later cut to 11. But 9 in turn had cut itself and become 8. Now 8 should be properly located above it. And 1. And please do this all neatly, because if you mess things up then you'll misunderstand numbers. So say for example you start adding 9 plus 5 or 6 plus 7 or 2 plus 2, if you mush up things together, and then it will be very difficult and frustrating for you. So we solve the question further ahead. So 9 minus 8 is 1, 11 minus 5 is 6, point 8 minus 7 is 1, 6 minus 2. In this case, the neighbor has enough apples to give it to its, let's say, father. So 6 minus 2 is 4. And here we can write it 0. So as I've told earlier, that even if you write 27, you can write 27 as 0, 0, 0, 27 or 0, 27 or 0, 0, 27. The value remains the same. But if you write 27 and add 1 0 ahead of it, it becomes 270. If you add 2 zeros ahead of it, it becomes 2700 or 2700. So please bear that in mind. So 2 minus 0 is 2. So the final answer is 241.617. Now let's do more examples so that you have ease of logic and you have ease that you have learned everything you needed to learn in this video, so that you have better understanding of what you have learned today in this video. And you find no difficulty in understanding the subject, addition and subtraction of decimals. Okay, so let's take our example as, we start with subtraction because I find that many people find subtraction more difficult than addition, so we'll try to do only subtraction. So let's take 2933. Don't get scared by the number, it is very easy, as I'm going to tell you. 0.133. Again, it is 2933.133, not 2933.133. So let's subtract this by 956.29. Okay, in this case we'll find which is the biggest number in these two sums. So in this case 2933.133 is the bigger number, so we write it down, 2933. We leave adequate gaps in between the numbers so that there's ease of calculation, and then we make sure that we write the smaller number below it, keeping in mind that the decimals are in a vertical fashion, they have been written in vertical order, and then we write the remaining decimal points. As I said earlier, that in order that all the numbers have the same number of decimal places, we are to add zeros to the empty place values. So we add 1 0 so that the number has same number of decimal places. In this case it only needs 1, and we begin with our calculation. Also please keep in mind that there is enough gap. The reason why I'm constantly reminding you this, so that you have no confusion in solving these sums whatsoever. So make sure that it is arranged in the vertical fashion, and then we begin our sum. So 3 minus 0 is 3. In this case, 3 does not itself have enough apples to provide to its other brother, so it goes to 1 asking for more apples. 1 does not have enough apples, so it goes asking to its other neighbor 3. In this case also, 3 does not have enough apples to give to 1, so it goes asking for its other neighbor 3, which is 3 also. So 3 itself also does not have enough apples to provide even to its own family, so it goes asking for her other neighbor 9. In this case, 9 also does not have enough apples to give to its brother, because say for example, if you had 5 apples, and one neighbor came asking for 1 apple and you gave 1 apple to it, so you cut yourself and you became 4 apples. So it changed to 4 apples because you gave 1 apple. So 5 minus 1 is 4 because you gave 1 apple to your other neighbor. But in this case, your brother asks for 5 apples and he's a very stubborn brother. So then you have no choice, but you could tell him that, no brother, we don't have any apples, there are only 4 apples and we do not have the adequate number of apples that you need. And then he starts throwing a tantrum. So in this case, 9 also does not have enough apples to provide for its brother or any other family member or any other friend, whichever example you want to choose. So 9 goes asking for more apples to 2. Now in this case, 2 has enough number of apples because actually no one wants the apples. In this case it is 0. 0 adding 0, it does not change the whole value of this number, 956.290. So 2 cuts itself and becomes 1 because it gave 1 apple to 9. So 9 is really happy and it becomes 19. Now 19, remembering that it had to give 1 apple to 3, so it cuts itself and becomes 18. Now 18 gives 1 apple. Now make sure that for ease of calculation and for neatness, make sure that the numbers that are carried, they are located directly above them. It can be slightly diagonal, but make sure that they are preferably located above them, so above the cut numbers. So in this case 19 became 18, so I've located it just a little diagonally away from the number, but you get the idea. So 19 cuts itself and becomes 18 and gives 1 apple to 3, and 3 becomes 13. Now 13 cuts itself and becomes 12. I have located this directly above the carried number, the cut number, and 13 becomes 12 because it has given 1 apple to 3, its other neighbor, and becomes 13 again. Now 13 also, remember its promise that it gave to its other neighbor, that it will give the apples as soon as possible if she has it. Now in this case she has it, so it cuts itself and becomes 12 again, and then it gives 1 apple to 1 and becomes 11. Now 11 also cuts itself and becomes 10. See, I have located it slightly to the right of the cut number, but you can write it in whatsoever appropriate way you want. So 11 cuts itself and becomes 10, and 11 gave 1 apple to its other neighbor 3, its final neighbor 3, which wanted apples in the first place. So 3 becomes 13. There's no need to cut itself because it does not want to give any other apples to any other neighbor, because no other neighbor came asking for apples, because 3 had enough apples to feed her family. So we'll solve the calculation further. So 13 minus 9 is 4. 10 minus 2 is 8. There are decimals here, point. 12 minus 6 is 6. 12 minus 5 is 7. 18 minus 9 is 9. And 1 minus 0 is 1. So the final answer is 1976.843. Let's solve one more example, subtraction. I hope you guys have already understood it. Okay. So the second example is, let's take some other color, let's say orange, and we'll solve the third example. So the third example is 92.86 minus 49.11. Okay, 112, let's say 3. So here it has 4 decimal places. So let's take the bigger number. Now please bear in mind, even though this number has the bigger number of decimal places, it does not matter, because the more bigger number is 92.86, not 49.1123. So even if some bully confronts you and says that I'm more stronger than you, if it has no brains, then there's no point in fighting. I hope you get what I mean. So in this scenario, 92.86 is more bigger than 49.1123, even though it has a more number of decimal places to its right. So in this case it's 4. So we'll, anyways, getting back to the point, we'll write 92.86, leaving enough gaps between them, and then we'll write 49.1123. Now I have left some gaps for ease of calculation. I hope you do the same. We have arranged all the numbers in vertical fashion so that there's ease of calculation and no chaotic misinterpretations, so that your answer does not become wrong. And fill the empty place values with zeros so that all the numbers have the same number of decimal places. So in this case we need only 2 number of zeros so that the numbers have the same number of decimal places. And again I repeat, by adding any number of zeros, it does not wholly change the value of the number. So let's solve it. So 0 minus 3, 0 does not have enough apples, so it goes to its neighbor asking for more apples. 0 does not have enough apples also, so it goes for 6. Now in this case 6 has enough apples to give to its other neighbor. So 6 cuts itself and becomes 5. You have located it above the cancelled number, so there's ease of calculation and better understanding. So it gives 1 apple to its neighbor. So 0 becomes 10, it cuts itself and it becomes 9, and then it gives 1 apple to 0, its final neighbor, and then it becomes 10. There's no need to add, so there's actually no need to cancel itself again to give other apples to other neighbors, because if you have 2 apples and the other neighbor has adequate number of apples to give his family, so what will it do with the remaining 2 apples you have? So then in this case, let's go ahead, we'll solve. 10 minus 3 is 7, 9 minus 2 is 7, 5 minus 1 is 4, 8 minus 1 is 7, decimal points, 2 minus 9. Now in this case also 2 does not have enough number of apples to provide it to its dog, and its dog is nearly going to tear her brains out. So she goes running to her village, she goes running towards her neighbor and asks for more apples. So the neighbor says that I have apples, there's no need to panic. So it gives 1 apple to 2, it becomes 12, and then 9 cuts itself and becomes 8. I've located it above the cancelled number so that you might understand it perfectly. And 12 does not need to cancel itself to give 1 apple to 8, because 8 has adequate number of apples to give it to its family member. So let's solve it. 12 minus 9 is 3, 8 minus 4 is 4, so the final answer is 43.7477. I hope you guys have enjoyed this lecture.